Hey, this is Sandy.
And Randy.
And we're here on AT Corner.
Being an athletic trainer comes with ups and downs, and we're here to showcase it all.
Join us as we share our world in sports medicine.
Welcome back to another episode of AT Corner. This week's education episode, we are doing an interview. And not only just a regular old interview. This interview I've been dying to get going.
And who are we interviewing today?
We are interviewing Ned Bergert. He was the athletic trainer for the Angels for 30 plus years.
That is really, really awesome.
Also, what's really cool is I was lucky enough to actually have class from Ned Bergert.
And what's also really cool is that beyond what you've learned from class already, we've learned so much just from the amount of time that we spent with him.
Oh my goodness.
Recording in this podcast.
So much, just a lot of knowledge just in that man's head and just gem after gem.
You want to go ahead and introduce him?
Yes. So Ned received his Master's of Science from the University of Pennsylvania, California. He received his Bachelor's of Science from St. Ambrose University. His professional experiences include being a physical therapy assistant at Select Physical Therapy, where he currently works now, and of course, as the athletic trainer for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim for, like I said, 30 plus years. And those last 22 years, he was actually the head athletic trainer. He's also been the adjunct instructor at California State University Fullerton, go Titans, Chapman University,
go Panthers.
There we go, and Cal Poly Pomona. I think we could say go Broncos.
Yeah.
We could throw that in there.
And actually, he has a new role.
Ooh.
Probably his favorite role. In the past week, he has become a new grandfather.
That's exciting. And you can tell he was definitely excited as well.
So in this episode, we do talk about expectations of an athletic trainer in the professional setting. We also talk about how everything has changed over the years, what has prepared him for that, just general advice, and then so many more gems. So without further ado, let's hear from Ned. Randy, you want to get us started?
Yes, we're going to jump right on into some cryo breakers. So Ned, what made you become an athletic trainer?
Well, it started back in 8th grade. I was wrestling and in junior high, and I could tell you the number of ceiling tiles and holes in the ceiling tile in the wrestling room. So I was spending a lot of time on my back, which, as you know, in wrestling is not a good thing. So a gentleman named Carl Ryder, who was the wrestling coach, head PE instructor, said, took me aside and says, young man, we need to find something else for you to participate in athletics. And so he kind of introduced me to what athletic training was. And then he contacted the athletic director at Downport Central, where I graduated, a gentleman named Jim Fox. And he said, yeah, well, do something. And that was just when the Kramer Company was starting their program athletic training in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
Which really dates me. It was a blue 3-ring binder that had everything from how to treat wounds to tape an ankle to tape a knee, whatever was in there. And during that summer between 8th grade and my freshman year at high school, the school district sent me down to Gardner, Kansas to do a 2-week course at the Kramer Company and learn how to be a /student athletic trainer.
Oh.
So that's how I got my initial start.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
It's really cool to see how someone just paved the way for you.
Yeah. I was very blessed. As I said, I'm originally from Davenport, Iowa, which is part of the Quad Cities, which is Davenport, Bettendorf on the Iowa side, Rock Island, Molina on the Illinois side. The only certified athletic trainer back then was a gentleman named Reg Speak, who was at Bettendorf High School. And he'd hold little Saturday classes for us wannabes to come and learn from him. And so he kind of became my mentor in athletic training when, as a student, I think I was more of a manager / water boy / he knows how to tape ankles and take care of cuts type of guy. But it kind of paved the way to move on. And then after high school, I went to Palmer Junior College, which was part of the Palmer Chiropractic College. Back then, you had to have a degree. So Dr. David Palmer started the junior college, and it was a night school. And you went from class to start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night. And so they had a basketball team, was their only sport. So I was the athletic trainer / emergency 6-man off the bench when we got down. So I actually got some minutes in and got to play a little bit. So it was pretty amazing.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
And then after that, in the middle of my sophomore year at Palmer, a gentleman named Jerry Lambert was a basketball official, and he happened to sprain his ankles during one of our games, and I tended to him and took care of him and got him back officiating, and he turned out to be the general manager of the then Quad City Angels. And at the same time here in Anaheim, Freddie Federico, who was a head athletic trainer for the Angels then, had also become the traveling secretary, and just doing those two jobs were too much. So he brought up the AAA trainer guy by the name of Doug Atkinson, who later went on to the Chicago Bulls and the Dallas Mavericks. And then, so there was this cascade effect that the Quad City Angels needed an athletic trainer. So I became the athletic trainer for the Quad City Angels, and I did that for 4 years. Now, fate lines up that in baseball, there's scouts that come and look at people, and one of the scouts was a gentleman named Kenny Blackman. And Kenny was the baseball coach at St. Ambrose University, which I ended up going to and graduating from and getting my undergraduate degree. And Kenny came to me and says, "Hey, would you like to come to Ambrose?" And I was very fortunate that I got a full scholarship as an athletic trainer to take care of the athletes. And then in March, I'd march off to spring training. This went on for a couple years, and I finally said, I'm going to take 12 years to finally graduate from college at this rate. And I met with the academic dean, Dr. McCafferty, and he says, here's what we'll do. You take my class. And it was called Ethics of Human Sexuality. And you met once a week. The class was limited to 12 students. He says, if you get an A in my class, I will give you permission to take whatever class as long as the instructor agrees. Basically, I'll call it hybrid now, because I would stay up till March and go. So I did it. I was fortunate enough to get an A in the class, and so I was able to graduate in 6 years instead of 12.
Hey, look at that, cutting the time in half.
Yeah, and then at the end of the 1978 season, Freddie Federico retired, and so then I got elevated to from single A to the big leagues, starting in the 79 season, to be the assistant athletic trainer for the Angels. And the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, that's crazy how just everything lined up and just really paved the way.
Yeah. I really think it's a God thing that, you just kind of, follow and get things. And if you reflect on it, look back on it, and say, wow, how'd that happen? How that, that special occurrence.
I mean, they say right place, right time, but it wouldn't happen if it wasn't the right person.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So with that, we want to know, what is your athletic training spirit animal? And this is a modality, rehab tool, tape, braces, etc., something of the trade that represents you as a clinician.
Well, I have to say it's my hands, my mind, my eyes, all my senses.
Okay.
I learned early on that you have to put your hands on the patient. You have to feel the tissue. You have to look at the patient, look at the injury, but look at the total picture. Use your senses to know what's going on, not only with the injury, but with the person and how you're treating them. I know that, people like to use tools these days, and I've toyed with it, but I really still like to use my hands, so I can feel the tissue. I can feel that tissue change under my hands. I can see if I'm giving too much pressure and the patient's wincing or getting ready to kick me in the face, whatever it might be. So that's what is my go-to tools: my hands, my mind, and my senses.
Good thing to rely on.
Yeah.
Something always with you.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that can't go wrong right there.
Mm-hmm.
Having just, like you said, having that feel and being able to actually experience the experience with the patient. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So with AT Corner, we really like to pair evidence and experience together. So can you kick it off with maybe a story, an experience, or even a case study about actually working in professional baseball? It can be funny, serious, or anything.
Well, I'm going to start with a little funny story before I jump into that. It's, as we know, we've all had the pandemic, and we're doing that. And we're open. We were medical facility and masked up, cleaning every piece of equipment 3-4 times. Our poor aides are, disinfectant themselves. Well, during the pandemic, I was fortunate to have a number of professional athletes. So this one afternoon, I have a NFL lineman and a player from the NBA and they're working together. Now the NFL lineman he's probably pushing 285, 6'4", a little small kid. While the NBA guy's 6'10", 245. So another tiny little kid. We had a patient at that time was 98 years old, and she come walking on her walker and looked over at them, looked at me, looked over at them, looked at me, says, "You going to make me do that today?" I says, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "Bring it on. I'll be in the room." So, but it was just in that environment. It's just great to work because the clinic I work in is a mix of, we see a lot of athletes, high school, professional, industrial athletes, law enforcement, and we see a lot of the mature adults coming in. And so it's great to have that mix, that they motivate each other. Professional wise, working with, the baseball, there's so many, good stories and so many things, but it's just, I think it's having that camaraderie as with any team, and how you care and care about people and their families. I was very fortunate that when I started, the Angels were owned by Gene Autry, the singing cowboy. And please keep buying Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Keeps the Gene Autry Western Heritage Museum library going. But Mr. Autry really believed in family. He believed that everybody from the front office to the people who washed down the stands to the players were all family. We're all part of that. And so we would get every Sunday that we had a home game and we weren't traveling the next day and we were staying, he would have us either up in his suite and have a big spread after the game. And everybody was invited. The players, their family, their wives, if their mom and dads or whoever were in town, all the staff, all the front office people came, and it was just great camaraderie. So we were in Palm Springs training, and Mr. Autry had the Gene Autry Hotel, and he lived in a villa in the back. And the kids finally talked him in. He had a big bonfire going to get his guitar and sing. So he spent the night with all the little kids and us older kids around, listening to him sing and just having a great time. So that's a real fond memory of baseball, and kind of leads into, one of your other questions about how it's changed.
I was just gonna say, man, I feel like you don't hear stories like that much, like in like the modern day professional sports. That's a really cool moment.
Yeah. And the other one that kind of jumped is, I was thinking, none of these are players, but this was in the old, before they remodeled the stadium, how many times they remodeled, used to come down the elevator and come right in and walk across the hall and walk into the training room. And then the training room, you go through to go into the locker room, and to the as you come in the training room was our wet room. And so Mr. Autry and President Nixon were really good friends. And so former President Nixon would show up, and you knew he was there because here comes his security detail in and secure the training room. And they'd secure the wet room area, they'd secure the front and back door, and then here comes the former president with the entourage and come in, and they just plop down on the tables and start talking to the players, talking to the Rod Cruz, the Reggie Jackson, so forth and so on. And, Mr. Autry would, have like Glenn Campbell and Pat Buttram, who was called the mayor of Hollywood, and so forth and so on. All these people just gathered in the training room. Well, one day we're sitting there and somebody got hurt during batting practice, and we bring them up and just bleeding, and they're sitting, and we say, "Got to get off the move, get off the tables," and they move, and former President Nixon sat down and he says, "Give me some gauze," and he reaches in and hands me the gauze. So he became my little assistant, helping me take care of that wound.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
That just shows everyone, even the president of the United States, comes to hang out in the athletic training room.
Exactly.
So, like you said, you're already kind of leaning into it, and you have definitely been able to see, a huge experience within pro sports. So from when you first started to what you've seen now, how has professional sports changed?
Well, I think it's changed as medicine has changed. It's the medicine, when I first started, if somebody would have, say, a sprained ligament in their knee, the orthopod would throw them in a cast for 6-8 weeks, and you take the cast off, and it's like, okay, we got to get some motion back here and doing that. Where now they'll usually just put them in a brace, if that, and get them moving right away. The surgical techniques have changed so much. To do a Tommy John way back when Dr. Job and Dr. Stark first started, it was really an open procedure, and now the scar on Tommy John was basically from the middle of his forearm up to the middle of his tricep area, where now it's a small scar, and I think some are even trying to do it arthroscopically. I haven't seen that yet, but I imagine it's going to come about. Scoping the shoulder, the imaging techniques. It used to be just an X-ray, and MRI, CT was kind of in its infancy. Now, in majority, if not all, university professional sports team will have, at a minimum, an X-ray machine. Probably most major universities and professionals have ultrasounds, so they can do diagnostic ultrasounds right in the athletic training room, and get instant information. The time spent by the athletic trainer has grown immensely. When I first started, our games would start on the East Coast at 8:00. On the West Coast, usually about 7:30ish, to give people a chance to go home and come from work. Where now they'll start, at 6:37, whatever the time is. But the athletic trainers are coming in, like at 11 in the afternoon or 11 in the morning, I mean, to get the reports done, to sit with this huge staff. When I started with the Angels, it was Rick Smith was the head athletic trainer and myself as the assistant. And Dr. Rosensky and Dr. Triggs as our internist, and Dr. Curlin and Dr. Yoakum as the orthopods. And that was the medical staff.
Mm-hmm.
Where now I can't even tell you how many, I think the Angels have at least 3 athletic trainers ahead and maybe 2 assistants, probably 2 PTs, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
They have a head and assistant strength and conditioning coach, nutritionist, an employee's assistance personnel, and the list goes on, exercise physiologist, whatever it is. But when we first started, it was Rick and I, and we did everything. We, were the athletic trainers. We were the strength and conditioning coaches. We were, go out and stretch. We were the, lead the stretch. He was, or as we call it, chit and chat while Ned and Rick were stretch, because everybody just, didn't think you needed to stretch. Just as the science of medicine has changed, the way athletic trainers have changed. And we could go on with that, but that's people using analytics, measuring sleep patterns. The sleep stuff was just starting to become more prominent. It was brought in by Tampa Bay was the first one that I can remember really pushing the sleep information way back in the early 2000s. And now, guys wear their whatever Fitbit or Apple Watch or whatever device they're using and analyze that data. Well, you didn't get enough sleep last night. Maybe we gave you some rest. It's like, well, I got a newborn baby. I got home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's changed. So just the amount of hours that you have to put in. And when we first started, there was a landline. We didn't have cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the year, but I can remember I finally when there were cell phones, it was like a big walkie-talkie that you walked around. You carry it with you on a strap, and then you could call. Before you had to find a landline. Going into old Boston Red Sox park, you had to go through a switchboard operator.
Oh my
Her
gosh.
name was Helen. And Helen was the sweetest person you ever met if you got on her good side. So to get out to make a call, you had to dial 0. Hello, Helen. This is Ned, the athletic trainer for the Angels. I need to call Dr. Yoakum. Give her the number. She'd dial it, wait to connect, and then make sure it was Dr. Yoakum, and then get off the line. Well, guys would go in there because the only phone in the clubhouse was in the training room besides the one in the manager's office. And she said, nope, I don't care who you are. Call your wife or whatever. There's a payphone outside. And so it became a running joke that Rick and I were the only 2 who could get out on that line when we were going. But how it's changed. Now we get our text messages, we get our emails, we get our phone calls, our phones blowing up, and management wants information instantaneously.
Of course.
They want to know that, X player is going to be out for 4 weeks and you haven't really got him back to the training room and put your hands on him to say, well, let's see what we got here, or done any diagnostic studies. So I think that's one of the big things is there's a lot more pressure. As the salaries increase, I think the pressure on the medical staff has increased exponentially.
So what are those expectations like as an athletic trainer working in a professional sport?
Nobody gets hurt, nobody gets missed time, and you get them, if they are, you get them back in the field in what the Google Doc says. Dr. Google.
Yeah, exactly.
So, If Dr. Google says they should be back in 2 weeks and it took you 3, what's the problem? And management does that. There's, I forget what the website is, but you can go on and see how many lost days a team has and see what that equates out into financial loss. And when you're talking about guys making millions plus dollars, it adds up fast, and there's a lot of pressure from management. Why aren't you getting this person back? And then the trickle down from that is they have to bring people up, so that costs them more money. You get somebody that comes up in their that get their service time. It's a business. It's a big business. Whereas I said earlier, it was more of a family thing. Even though Mr. Autry was the first owner when he paid Don Baylor, Bobby Grich, and Joe Rudy $1 million a year, you thought the baseball owners just went into shock. But we never got that. It wasn't until you got the multi-year contracts with the millions and millions of dollars that you got that. But so be it.
So you kind of hinted with it previously, but what does that typical day kind of look like? And especially for like in your case, like for the professional baseball athletic trainer.
Yeah. Well, I can only relate to what I did some 12 years ago. And so generally we'd get into the stadium around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And the first thing we do is we turn our computers on and make sure our reports were accurate. If we had any updates from maybe somebody had a diagnostic study that day or saw a doctor, and get that report ready for when the staff had their meeting. Generally about 1:30ish or so, I get all the athletic trainers, our physical therapists, our strength and conditioning coach together, and we kind of go over what our plan was for the day. That Randy's got a plantar fasciitis, but he's getting ready to. We want him to run. Who's going to do that? What are we going to look for? Where are we telling the coaches and management who's available, unavailable type thing? So that usually lasts 15-ish minutes, and then they'd have their coaches meeting, and we'd go in and give a quick update about 2 o'clock. And then that's when the guys would start trickling in, that we would start doing treatments for about 2 o'clock. And then at home, you generally have early batting practice at 3 o'clock. This is for a 7:30 game. So you would have your extra guys would come in generally, and you'd be giving them treatment. Guys that maybe were on were disabled list or injury list, as it's called now, come in and giving them their first rounds of treatment. You get guys out, the extra guys out on the field, or guys doing extra work by 3 o'clock. And we always made sure that we had somebody on the field, whether a certified or we were very fortunate to have a great relationship with Cal State Fullerton and have interns around and, have that intern down there, or at least they, somebody that could do CPR or something. This is before NATA changed what the student could do. But we'd always make sure we had somebody on the field with first aid, CPR skills, in case we ever had an injury, and somebody with a walkie-talkie or a cell phone to contact us if it was catastrophic. Then after about 2:45, 3 o'clock, the starting players would start coming in, and so we do our therapy on them. And then usually about 4 o'clock, the extra guys come off the field. We have about a half hour there to clean everything up before we take the the strength and conditioning coaches would take them down to the field to do their pregame active warm up before batting practice started at 5 o'clock. So once they went down the field, we'd get on our computers and start filling in our SOAP notes, making sure our documentation was up to date and correct, and then try to sneak down the field for a little bit, watch a little batting practice, get a breath of fresh air, and then after batting practice, which usually ended about 5:40 or so, we come back and they would have a spread, which was food for the players to eat. So everybody would get a little nutrition, rehydrating, getting ready to go. The starting pitcher would be starting his routine, depending on who he was, probably about 6 o'clock. So we would have him, we always like to do an active warm up, which they would always do either on a bike or getting on the treadmill or whatever their cardiovascular choice is to break a sweat. And then we come in and stretch the body parts that they wanted stretched, especially the shoulder, the elbow, if they had tight hips, stretch that. And then they'd generally be walking out of the training room by 6:30, 6:40, depending on how much time they spent warming up in the bullpen. And then the starters have come back in, getting those last minute things done if they had an active injury, or maybe doing a modality, making sure that if something was taped or braced, everything was applied correctly, and then scoot everybody out for the national anthem. One of the things that the organization really stresses when the national anthem is played, everybody who is in the dugout, is in the clubhouse, is required to be on the top step to honor the country and to stand out for the national anthem. At least that's where it was. And so that was like, okay, everybody's out. We can go out and we can enjoy a couple of innings of the game. So it depends on what we were doing. Usually we watched, one of us would stay down for the first 3 innings, and the other one would switch back and forth. And generally the previous day's starting pitcher would come in usually in the 4th inning to get his soft tissue work, get rid of whatever tightness, whatever, was working. So that's a lot of manual therapy. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of P&F with them, and then, get them out. And then in that time, the guys that we'd have on the injured list, we'd be, doing their second round of treatment, and then sneak out. Hopefully Angels win, the halo lights up, and, do our post-game treatments, get everything cleaned up, get ready for the next day, and then try to make it home for a nightline starting at 11:30. That was always my goal. Sometimes didn't make it, but that was the goal.
Especially when you get those extra innings.
Yeah, it is. And or if you spend the evening in the hospital with somebody, or there's always a roster move or whatever it was. So that's kind of a typical day. It would change very on the road. It's similar but a little different, because your first day in, you had to get to the ballpark a little bit earlier, usually around noon, to get your trunks all pulled out and get everything set up. And then guys would drift in, and you got kind of the same progression. And then if it's the last day, you have to be packed up, ready to go. Bus is 45 minutes after the last out. So you had to have all your treatments done, trunks packed up and dressed in your suit and tie, and jump on the bus to get up to the plane and go to the next city.
Man, always on the go.
Yes.
So what were some of your favorite parts working in professional sports?
I just think the relationships that you built with those who are around you, relationships with staff, relationships with the players, relationships of the physicians and that I met over the years. I was, very fortunate to work with one of the finest orthopedic surgeons in Dr. Louis Yoakum. And I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Curlin and Dr. Job and, the whole KJOC group. And, to travel down to Tampa Bay, Dr. Andrews might be in visiting, or you go to New York and, see Dr. Olchek and so forth, or Dr. Pappas up in Boston. Names when you go back and do your lit reviews and you pull up those papers from the, late 70s, early 80s, those are the principal authors. And, as they grew, they're the ones that had the residents and fellows, and their names are always on those papers. So I was very blessed to be around those people and learn a lot from them. The other thing that was enjoyable is when the team had a rule that when your children turned 15, they could take one trip before the All-Star break and one trip after the All-Star break with you. So
That's so
when
cool.
our oldest son got 15, we go on a trip before and after, and we made it a rule with ourselves that on the second day of the city, let's say if we're in Boston, we would go get up early and go do something. Go like to walk the Freedom Trail or go to the Kennedy Library or so forth or so on. And that was really fun. It gave me time to spend with them. My wife got to go on trips too, and we didn't follow the go see things on. We slept in, but get the kids out. Get the kids out and moving and just enjoy it. And they still remember that, which is fun.
Oh,
And then
that is
just
so awesome.
watching my fellow athletic trainers grow in the minor leagues. I've been very fortunate to have some wonderful men who have worked for the Angels and are now working in other professional settings, from professional sports to universities to colleges to doing that.
Kind of goes back to what you were talking about originally with that whole culture of family.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was the thing that kids were accepted to come in and be around, be in the clubhouse and hang out and have fun. It was when our oldest son was, I don't know, 10, 12 in that range. The clubhouse was full of the Timothy DeSense's who's went on to play in the big leagues. The Boone's kids were there, and so I mean it was really they'd go between in the old stadium before the remodel. They used to have what they called the surf room, which was the old California Surf, the professional hockey or soccer team, and they go in there and play softball, and they could go and then when we had batting practice, if they would go out on the field and chase balls down, and they if their dad was out there, they let him hit off the balls. That's where I knew Cecil Fielder was going to be pretty good, because at the age of 13, he kept hitting balls out of Angel Stadium. It was like, wow. So that whole sense of family, of community, and I was very blessed to be around at that time.
On the other hand, what would you say were some of the drawbacks of working as an athletic trainer in professional sports?
The amount of time you spend at the ballpark, the amount of time that you're away from your family, on the road. We're very fortunate that we always traveled in good, well, almost always in good aircraft. but sleeping in a different bed every 2 to 3 nights. I started carrying my own pillow because my neck didn't appreciate hotel pillows. The main thing was not having time with the family, but again, wasn't a bad thing, because I made it an effort that when I was home, I don't care what time I got home. If I got home from an East Coast road trip at 4:00 in the morning, I'd get myself out of bed and make sure that my wife and the kids would have lunch to take to school and work, and that they all had a breakfast that and I'd sit there and make, and I just think that was so important, that it taught our children that, that's how you're a loving, caring parent, is you make that extra effort to go out. And even though you're tired, you're grouchy, you want them to have a good day. But I think for all the negatives, there's positives, and it just balances out. It just depends on the person and what you do with those stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely what we've said before in like different episodes, because we've talked to many different people from different settings, and it's a pros and cons. Every setting has its pros and its cons. It's how you balance that.
Yeah.
So you already kind of talked about just how instant communication has to happen. From how you've seen it, how is the communication about an athlete's health status different in the pro level compared to maybe some other levels of sports like college or community college, stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing is that probably 99% of professional athletes have an agent. So you have the agent in the background wanting to direct the medical care of the people, of their clients. That gives them they think that gives them a sense that they're really caring for their people. And maybe it is, I don't know. But I think that would be the one major thing. I don't know. I don't think NC2A allows athletes to have agents until they declare that they're going into the draft.
Correct.
That's probably the big thing. Parental involvement's the same on the major league level as on the university level. That mom and dad wants to know what they're going to do. Never let mom shave down calluses on their baby's feet, because they'll use a rusty paring knife and then get a cellulitis.
My gosh.
Just saying. But I think that's the big difference, is the agent, having the agents, and a lot of agents now, I know, like the Boris company here in Southern California has a whole medical staff that takes from the strength and conditioning director to athletic trainer and trainers that watch the records of the player and keep in contact with them.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with, just your journey, just how everything kind of lined up, and just, the changing of the guard over the years, within that time, what helped you feel prepared to work in the professional setting? Because it can get intense, and some people could be intimidated by that and maybe not feel as prepared.
Or also kind of going off that, what made you prepared to kind of follow in the changes of the professional setting that you were talking about?
Well, one, I like I said, I was blessed to have a wonderful medical director in Dr. Yoakum, and surrounded myself with very good people to teach me how to do stuff. And by that, I mean the minor league athletic trainers that we hired. I swear and I don't take this lightly, that were smarter than me, were more educated than me, and I just soaked up the knowledge that they brought to the table. Like in spring training, we always We always had our AAA trainer with us at the start of spring training, but then we'd rotate the other minor league athletic trainers with us for a minimum of a week, so we could soak up their knowledge and what was, what were they thinking, and get their input. I was a voracious reader and still am. I mean, journal, back then we had the old paper journals, but I'd pack up the journals in my backpack, and when I got on the plane, I just find go through, find articles that were relevant, and do that. Continuing education, spent, we didn't have the online courses or the Zoom courses, which you do now. You did the in-person one, and Dr. Yoakum and myself started the PBATS baseball medicine conference to bring people together once a year to learn, and that was directed at people who weren't in the baseball community, because one of the things we found is when we'd send people out to be rehabbed during the winter, they return to their home area, and there might not be a therapist or athletic trainer there with a real solid knowledge of how you treat a baseball athlete, especially a pitcher. And so that was kind of the motivation of why we started that. But it's just continuing to learn, continuing to know that you're not the smartest person in the room, and not afraid to ask the question that might seem obvious to other people, but don't try to bluff your way through it.
Always learning.
Yeah.
Always learning. All right. So Sandra's an action person.
I am.
She loves all right, let's bring it all together.
Let's get down to business.
All right, what do you got?
So we have an action item. Ned, what advice would you give to someone who is interested in working in professional sports?
Well, I think the first thing is make sure you're prepared. Usually you're going to want to try to go through an internship to get your foot in the door. When we started our internship program, that became our gateway to hiring our minor league athletic trainers. And I think if you can get your foot in the door, you have a chance of moving up. But you can't, as a new grad with your master's now, go in with the expectation that you're going to get hired in the big leagues. I think is very minimal. Whether it's NFL or NBA or whatever professional sports out there, you have to have the exposure. You have to have the working experience of dealing not only with the injury, but with the psychological, the social economical aspects of professional sports.
It's a lot to take on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, it's a lot to take on if a person's working at a university, college, JC setting, high school, wherever you're at. You're taking on similar responsibilities.
Right.
Maybe not. You're in the spotlight of national TV doing CPR on a player, but you still have that responsibility. You still have that task of caring for your athletes. So I'm gonna venture off track a little bit. I'm gonna give your listeners a little bit of what I did every day and still do when I'm going to work. Is at Angel Stadium, you used to park out in the outfield, and then you walk down and there was a tunnel. And so after I park and say hello to the parking attendants and walk down, I'd start my scenarios in my head. And the worst scenario for anyone, an athletic trainer, is what? Somebody dies.
To do CPR.
Yeah, somebody dies on you, you have to do CPR.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd start with that. How many compressions, how many breaths, where's the AED, blah 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 blah, and had this thing. And the next thing is what if somebody gets struck in the head? What if whatever the scenarios are? But by the time I got to the front door of the clubhouse, I had repeated this in my mind every day, whether it was home or on the road. So when something happened, it was done by instinct, and it didn't have to be thought about. It didn't have to. And this, what brings it is a story. Is way back when I was helping Jim Cobra out at the sports clinic in Riverside, and Jim has I think 32 high schools under contract. I don't know what he had then. And so we'd go on either cover JV games during the week and then varsity games, freshman games on Friday nights. And so we're in Rubidoux at high school, and I've gone through my scenario, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm missing something. What am I missing? And I'm watching a game, and everything's going fine. And there's a kickoff. A kid gets hit, breaks his leg, clear fracture. No doctor be seen, no other athletic trainer. So I go down there, stabilize him, calm him down, get mom and dad calm down. And I look at the AD, says, "Where's the ambulance?" "What do you mean?" "Well, there's no ambulance." "Well, nobody's called." And then here comes the ambulance shortly thereafter. And the ambulance is circling. Nobody had a pre-plan of where the ambulance comes in. And nobody had a key to the gate to let him in.
Oh, no.
So instead of having this emergency action plan in place, we looked like fools as we laid there for I don't know how long. Stopped the game, finally got him taken care of and off. And so that taught me a valuable lesson that make sure everything is in place beforehand, your emergency action plan, not only on paper, but in your head and shared with the whole community that's going to help you make you look good and make your organization look good, that you were able to take care of this with minimal distractions and minimal stress to you. So
Absolutely. That's perfect. And like you said, that definitely can't be stressed enough, especially after what happened, just a couple weeks ago. It really stresses how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
See, even the action item and beyond, he has so many gems.
Oh, like I said, it was just gem after gem, like you said, and he just pulls them out like that.
Actually, I really like how he kept going back to the idea of family.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's really something that, like, when you think of, like, professional sports, family is probably not the first thing you think of.
Right,
so it was really kind of cool to hear that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, every organization's different, but it's...
Yes, absolutely. And, some organizations are probably better than others. And obviously, like you were saying, as contracts have gotten bigger, probably more the business side has probably come in more than the family. But I thought what was really cool was even at that level, students always talk about, or young ATs talk about, like, oh, I want to go into pro, or I want to go into these like seemingly higher athletic levels. At the end of the day, you're still a student. Mm-hmm. And that's what really separates you as a clinician, is always being willing to learn and remembering that, hey, you're always a student every day, even after your certification, that you're not too big for trying to learn something new.
No, and that definitely goes for any setting.
Oh, 100%. Another thing that I thought was pretty cool is I just learned a lot in general about just pro sports. Like, there were a lot of different things that I just didn't know, like the whole interaction with, like, the agents, the travel and stuff like that. Like, that was a really cool and unique experience to just kind of hear about.
Yeah, I thought so too. And it's kind of like brings up the fact that there's intricacies of every setting, and you don't really do a deep dive until you're in it.
100%.
Or unless you have someone sit down and kind of like tell you, like, hey, this is how it is.
Oh, 100%. Like, Luckily, we had.
Exactly. So if you guys want to discuss this episode with other clinicians, you can do that. Go ahead and go to our Facebook group, facebook.com/group/ATcornerpodcast. And then if you guys are new, we do every other episode as education or stories. So this one was an education episode.
Yes.
Next week, we're going back to our stories where we share stories from real athletic trainers on various topics. And those topics are posted either in our Facebook group or every other week we post them in our Instagram stories, and we'll just ask a bunch of questions in our Instagram stories, kind of get prompts going, and that's how you submit a story.
Yep.
Or you can email us at atcorners@gmail.com. Randy, you got anything else?
Nope, that was perfect. Thank you for helping us showcase athletic training behind the tape. Bye.